So it did. It had had that staircase at your lodge.
Well, they didn't have that staircase. They had a picture of a staircase,
Okay.
and they basically because my lodge was only three floors high, and we had a gold plated elevator in our lodge building. So the place that I was at was actually the oldest brick house in the city. It used to be a landowner who had a factory down this little hill, and so when it was all farm area before it was a city, he used to be able to see his workers from his mansion. And then it, went through historical stuff, and then the city sold it, or the family sold it to the city. Then the city sold it to the Scottish Rite, and then the Scottish Rite made it into this fantastic. Like the architecture in this place is just second to none. Like it's really really well done. Archways, flooring, even the craftsmanship on the chairs, like all handcrafted wooden chairs, like so. But yeah, so we didn't have a staircase. We had a picture of one, and they would kind of walk you around like you're going up a staircase in a sense. But yeah, a lot of these guys were too old to even go up the stairs. They always have to take the elevator. So to do any symbolism of me walking up the stairs, I don't think they want to do it. So
install one of those little chairs that pulls the
yeah.
elderly up.
Yeah, the ones you can walk faster than.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, they definitely do. And then they have my favorite one though is the what was it called? The three steps in masonry. So like they have like a whole footloose moment, right? So like it's like we were saying earlier, like with the placement of your feet when you're doing like a sign of distress and stuff like that in an airport. They have a similar thing when you're going through like one of the signs, and it's one that it also kind of ties in with one of the handshakes that they would do, and it's like you kind of do this like weird, one foot forward and the other foot angled, and then you angle this one and go forward. And then when you meet with the Mason, there's you have like foot to foot, knee to knee, breast to breast, hand on back, cheek to cheek, and then you're whispering a passphrase, which is Mahabone, which I have no idea what that even means.
Hey guys, I just want to cut in real quick. I know he mentions this word and this phrase that he didn't know what it meant. As I was editing this, I did a quick search and found something on masoncode.com. It's an excerpt I want to read to you. But it says, this is called the Lost Master's Word. With the death of Hiram Habib, the Master's Word was lost, and thereafter a substitute word had to be used. This is most commonly given as Mahabone, although there are variants such as Mahaban. Said this word is whispered in the candidate's ear when he is being raised from the dead by means of the lion's grip. So when they're picking them up, like he was talking about earlier, that's when this word is whispered. Albert Pike provides us with the Hebrew original of this word is Mavanan, and tells us that this means Moab on, or emanation of virile energy. He doesn't tell us that the Hebrew word is valued at 756 when we use gematria, and this is equal to the Greek word ipaya, and it's the same word used in Acts chapter 3 verse 6 where it says rise up and walk. So he mentioned that and didn't remember what it meant, so I thought it was important that we looked that up, and I'll let you guys know. Back to the episode.
That one, that's like a handshake kind of footloose dance.
What did Rick
kinda,
say? The original Crip Walk. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
What up, cuz?
What up, cuz? Right there. Yeah, like it's you do this weird little thing, and then but it's like that, something like that's very obvious. So they have a different handshake for like more in the public, but you see it like if you know what
The
you're looking
knuckle
for.
push, yeah.
Yeah, the knuckle push, right? So it's like the first degree is in between first and second knuckle. Second degree is on the second knuckle, and then third degree is kind of like an old school handshake, like you would see like in the medieval movies, where you're almost like kind of gripping the forearm, not necessarily like the hand. And it's like the placement of the fingers is kind of like this on it. And so, if you know what you're looking for, you see it all the time. I think it was Rick actually that just sent me one of I don't know if it was like your house speaker shaking somebody's hand, literally in almost like, yeah, I live this stuff. Like, yeah, good catch. Like, that's exactly what I'm talking about. Like, you look at politicians when they're shaking each other's hands, you know, or musicians when they get up on stage and shaking the hand of another musician. You know, you see the handshakes, you see the symbolism, you see it everywhere in our movies, our music now. Well, not now, I guess always, but it's become like they don't even want to hide it anymore. You know, like you see the same thing with like different. What's his name? That Sam dude at the Oscars or whatever. Dressed up
from Britain, dressed up like Satan.
Yeah, you know, and then you got Doja Cat with her new thing where she's literally dressed up as a demon.
Yeah, with the tail and all. Yeah.
Yeah, like I'm like, guys, like, come on, you know, and like they're taking God out of schools and stuff.
And the thing is, too, is like with that stuff, the more I study, it all goes back to sun worship, and that's the reason why they don't like Christianity is because they see it as a perversion of the truth. The truth, the only begotten Son of God, is the SUN, and it's all the stories and gods throughout cultures are just allegories of the sun. Osiris, dying and resurrecting, sun god. Mithras, uh, dying and resurrecting sun god. Jesus, dying, resurrecting sun god. Boom, boom, boom. And then when you like read, there's a lot of common themes with it. Like Osiris, you know, he ruled his evil. I can't remember if it was his brother or cousin, but an evil family member. I think it was his uncle. Kills him, cuts him up into pieces, and then rules in his stead. And then uh, they Isis puts him back together again and procreates with him. And then Horus is born. When Horus comes to full age, he conquers his evil uncle and takes the kingdom back. Well, you see those common themes in movies every day? Look at Game of Thrones. Look at The Lion King. I mean, it's in your children's movies.
Yep.
And I swear, I think every single one of those is Freemason, not just Freemason. That's just a little piece of the puzzle, but Freemason, mystery schools, and secret society cults and stuff like that. It's all birds off of the same feather, in my opinion. But all these things are esoteric. I like to call elbow rubs or winks. You know, it's like those that know will catch it.
Well, look at Harry Potter, right? J.K. Rowling. She went to witch school, right? So it's like a lot of the incantations and stuff that they say are actual incantations. You know, I don't know what they are incantations for. I'm sure she wouldn't put nefarious stuff in the movie.
Well,
but
it can't be real. I've never been able to unlock a door. I've done that Allah Mora many times.
Yeah, I when I used to do spell casting, it never ended well for me.
Yeah,
so,
Oculus Reparo.
Or the invisible cloak, you know.
Yeah.
That's actually, who knows? Maybe there's an invisible cloak. I don't know. I mean, we've been lied to about basically
if there
everything.
is, we ain't seen it, have we?
It's right. It's like I saw a guy wearing camouflage walking down the street the other day, and when my girl and I were driving, I'm like, "Oh, did you see him?" She's like, "No." I'm like, "Yeah, neither could I, because he had the camo on, right?" Like, but yeah, no, it's everywhere, man. Like, I have to be careful what I'm even watching nowadays, because it's just like I don't want to invite anything in. And then like I don't know have you seen what's the name of it? Helier? Have you seen the Helier series on YouTube? So Helier I hate promoting it, but I hate not promoting it because they did a really good job. But they talk about Pan, and so like it's this whole documentary. They go into the Appalachians, however you pronounce it. And they're basically just doing like they're investigating like these creatures, right? And sightings of creatures and stuff. And they go in there, and it becomes this whole thing about Pan, the god Pan, and they start seeing like balloons and stuff, and it's kind of leading them down this whole thing. And then they start talking about how even it's almost like them doing this documentary was an initiation for the god Pan, low G god Pan, and how people watching it could become part of the ritual. And so it's like, oh, like I just watched this thing that now has become part of a ritual. And there was a really interesting story or interesting show called American Gods that used to be on, I think it was on Amazon. And the premise behind it was the more believers they had, the more power they had. All the little
Oh,
g gods
the
all existed.
Tinkerbell.
Yeah, right. Like they all exist on some level, and the more believers they had, the more powerful they were. And so then it was kind of like a war between the old gods and the new gods, was what the show was based on. And I thought that was a pretty interesting concept.
Oh yeah, and it's
Was that
Loosh is what it is. And I'll give you a spoiler alert because I know you listen to the show, but I just done a show with Vicky Joy Anderson, and she wrote the book They Only Come Out at Night, talking about sleep paralysis and stuff. And she's a very knowledgeable woman. She takes deep dives on all kinds of stuff. But she had just a chapter in her book talking about Loosh, and I'd never heard of this. And she said that basically these secret societies, occults, and the demonic or slash spiritual realm, that is their food. That's what feeds them, and it's energies. She says, like the Matrix. In the movie The Matrix, she said they had all these people cocooned up and in a sleep state, and they were feeding the energy that supplied the quote unquote real world. She said, so the evil entities, basically like Freddy Krueger, he feeds off fear. So
mm-hmm.
by scaring you and messing with you in your sleep and doing these things, it heightens your body's chemicals and pheromones, and they feed off of it. You're strengthening them whether you know or not. And that's why the Bible tells you, fear not, do not worry about what comes tomorrow, and all these kinds of things, because you are unwittingly feeding these things. And then you got the whole conspiracy theory too of the the letter that's a circle with a line through it, about these elites abducting children and torturing
Mm-hmm.
them, and when their fear is heightened, draining them and drinking it, and it gives them rejuvenating properties. I mean, there's just all kinds of stories that all correlate to this loosh.
Mm.
And that's what it is. You are unwittingly feeding spiritual entities, and it's kind of like the Tinkerbell story.
Yeah.
And that could be like an esoteric rub right there. If she will die unless you believe. If you believe and
Mm.
you clap your hands, she comes back to life.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and that's I would
But we got that episode
say
coming. You'll
that's
really enjoy it.
I'm looking forward to that. Yeah, that'll be good because it's like I definitely agree with that because even in my own personal experience, like I've always noticed that whenever I have a strong fear about something, it's usually something that it ends up coming true. It ends up happening, um, and so I try to live more through faith. If everything's going to work out, everything's going to be okay, instead of fearing what's going to happen. Just be like, take it as it comes, and when it happens, and then we deal with it. Instead of fearing that, this is gonna happen. Like for instance, like my girl's engine just blew on her car last week. So it's having car problems with needing two cars, working opposite shifts, working in different cities, and that was always one of my biggest fears. And these guys started praying, like it's like it just happened at one of the worst times, and I've always had that as one of my biggest fears. It was that was going to happen to us, and it just so happened that it happened when I was fearing it the most. And so I try now to kind of live more through faith that everything's going to work out and be okay. Because you're giving them energy with when you start thinking about them, when you're diving deep into researching them. You got to protect yourself.
Stay prayed up, yeah.
Yeah, armor of God in yourself, because you don't want to give them any strongholds. And that's where I think a lot of people who with addictions and stuff, like I can speak on that. I've had plenty of addictions myself over the years, but I think that the addictions, mental health issues are really just more of something nefarious in the spiritual realm, because we're not meant to be like that, and like a lot of people are, and there's a lot of dark going on in this world right now, and I see more and more people kind of coming to the light finally, I think, like myself, right? Like we've gotten away from doing, seances and rituals with groups of people and gotten away from worshiping false idols. Um, so I've come to the light, but there's so much going on, and people are giving so much. Like even look at what's going on right now in Israel and Palestine, right? Like there's just everywhere you look, that's all I see now is this, and the more energy you're giving to it, the worse things seem to be coming, because they just seem to be getting more and more powerful, And then, like I said, like with these even athletes, like throwing up Illuminati symbols and stuff like that. And it's like you're giving more and more power to it, and then you get these kids that see it all on TikTok, and then they get impressioned by it and start doing things themselves. And I think that's kind of how it started with me. Like I had this disdain for the Catholic Church, met some people that took me down a road that I probably shouldn't have gone down,
Yeah.
But it's almost weird because like I don't necessarily believe in fate, but I kind of believe that I had to go down that road in order to kind of wake up, and but I don't recommend it. Like it's,
Oh yeah,
I don't
some of us
recommend
learn the
it,
hard
but
way. You know what I mean?
yeah,
It's not recommended for everybody. You definitely don't want to. There's many lessons in life you do not want to learn the hard way, but some of us are just stubborn. We have to find out for ourselves.
Guys, what's up? Tom Dunn here from Through the Black. We have launched our new ministry outreach, No More Dead Babies. And the website is nomoredeadbabies.com. We want you to go to that website and get a free t-shirt, okay? We want you to join the movement, okay? We need soldiers to step up and say that they're going to be a voice for the voiceless, okay? Guys, we've never done anything like this before. This is a big deal, and I don't know who all is ready for it out there, but it's time to step up, okay? And we're asking you to go to the website and order the shirt. The shirt is free, but you got to pay for shipping, okay? We're going to ship it out to you as soon as we get it. You tell us what size you need, and then we're going to send you the t-shirt, okay? Join us. The goal is to get thousands of these shirts out. Keep pushing this. I think this boldness can be contagious.
My name's Nick. I'm the owner of Kevlar Joe's, and I'm the roaster. I'm an Air Force Security Forces veteran, a dad to 3 wild boys, and a husband to my wife, Crystal, and a coffee enthusiast. From a family in a small town in Missouri, we started with the simple idea of crafting a perfectly bold cup of coffee. Inspired by wellness and countless pots of stale coffee while deployed, we wanted to craft a bold, clean, and smooth coffee. So we did. And we realized we wanted to share this coffee with our friends. Lord knows we could all use a good cup of coffee right about now. From the farm to your coffee cup, there's nothing like a good, well-crafted, and bold cup of coffee. No matter what time of the day, it's there to pick you up, motivate you, and relax you. We hope you enjoy our coffee. Be bold, be humble, be Kevlar. And you can find Kevlar Joe's Coffee Company anytime you want at www.kevlarjoe.com. Enjoy.
I'm definitely stubborn. I'll give my wife can attest to that.
Yeah, definitely. Which
yeah, I mean,
I wanted I was just wanting to touch on this because as I've been studying, I've been reading, some of these books, and I've been reading Morals and Dogma and stuff, and just kind of taking notes here and there. And I found this actually today, and I was trying to hurry up and print it off before I got on with you. But I thought this was interesting. I'd never heard this before, and this was from a very small book that I found, I think, at Books A Million. But it's called Freemasonry by Giles Morgan. And like I said, this thing is only maybe that thick. It's not that thick, but there's some really good stuff in there.
This one?
It probably is, but that ain't that exact one. This one is just a small little paperback, so it might be just excerpts out of that. But is that the same guy, Giles Morgan?
Yeah, Giles Morgan. This is so it's Freemasonry, its history and myths revealed.
Okay. See, I'll have to
So it's an
check that
actual.
out, man, because I bet you I just got the condensed version. Because
Oh, okay, yeah.
yeah,
This is the like it talks about. I mean, this it's very. Um, what can I? What's the word I'm looking for? It's very non-conspiracy.
yeah.
Like it's very more. This one's more of like what's out in the open. Like this, you can go buy this at a bookstore or on
Yeah.
Amazon or something
Well,
like
see,
that. It's
this one
not.
is like that too, but he does give, other thoughts. He's like, this is what we know, but there are scholars and people that think this, and here's why they think it. I mean, he doesn't come right out and,
Mhm.
condemn everything, but he gives you I like that he gives you the information and lets you make your decision. But,
Yeah.
but it says, two figures in the ancient world whose influence looms large in Freemasonry is the man god Hermes. So he's part man, part god. So I mean, with a biblical lens, that's a Nephilim.
Hmm.
It says, and the Greek philosopher and mathematician Pythagoras. It says lots of Egyptian roots has found itself in Freemasonry. Masonry ties correlations to Hermes and the Egyptian god Thoth, which was the god of wisdom or of light. It says Alexander the Great conquered Egypt and brought Hermes and then blended him with Thoth. So we come up with Hermes Trismegistus, who became the god of astrology and magic. Both gods served as guides to the souls of the dead through the planetary spheres. And it says Hermes said to have produced written records called the Hermetica, the
Emerald
Hermetic
tablets.
literature, yep, informed magical education of Egyptian priests. These papyrus documents contained esoteric information about rites of initiation with the priesthood and conjuring of spirits. Hermetic tradition had a dramatic impact on the development of alchemy, which many Freemasons practice. And another, like you mentioned this one, the occult groups and the ties with the emerald tablets of Hermes. And this philosophy of all things are interlinked as above, so below.
Hmm.
It says, and this text states that the wisdom of the universe is divided into three sections. And because Hermes understood them all, he was known by the title Three Times Great: Astrology, Alchemy, and Supernatural Magic. And that alchemy wasn't just physical transformation, but it was the refining of the soul. And that the Rosicrucian movement was shaped by the Hermetic thought, even though that they were Christians. But the Rosicrucian had a clear influence on Freemasonry, as the Scottish Rite of the 18th degree was even named after them, the Knights of the Rosy Cross. I was like, that is pretty wild.
Yeah, actually, is it the 18th? Yeah, Knight of Rose Cross. Yeah. So in the Bible, they actually have a breakdown of all the degrees for the Scottish Rite and York Rite, and um, but yeah, that is one of the. So can't remember if it was in the ritual lecture, or if it was because they'll do like guys every now and then at least in my lodge anyway, they had a guy that was like the spiritual leader kind of thing, and so he would give just 5-10 minute long talks on certain things, and one of the things he talked about was uh, spiritual alchemy, right? So like, and they talked about he talked about the emerald tablets and how like the philosopher's stone, right? Like you could change metals into gold, right? So like the physical alchemy of changing a metal into a gold. And so he used that as a reference to spiritual alchemy, and uh, basically brought it into Freemasonry, and like how, again, making good men better through
Taking the rough
uh,
ashlar to the perfect
exactly.
ashlar.
Yeah, learning all this stuff, becoming a better person, being charitable. Because like one of the things is faith, hope, and charity, right? Like, and brotherly truth, relief, and love are some of the slogans they use. So like they tote this whole thing about like you need to become a better person. You need to become a better person, which is fine. Like there's nothing wrong with that. Like I'm all for self improvement, especially if you realize that you're not a very good person, and you have that self awareness to start changing. Then no, absolutely. So they do talk about that. Like it is something that it's not openly talked about and all the time, but it is something that I have heard mentioned is the Emerald Tablets. Actually, it was a Mason who got me into researching about it. It was about the Emerald Tablets, and it's, I guess, from my understanding of it, was like basically the code to alchemy, right? And then to becoming, and again, like it's all about enlightenment, right?
Yeah.
It's becoming spiritually enlightened, and so you learn that through learning the sciences and mathematics and stuff like that. I mean, even Nikola Tesla, was quoted saying that if you understood the power behind 3, 6, and 9, you would unlock the keys to the universe. So they talk about that, and one of the things that I didn't think about until probably about a year ago, and if even that, was where did they get all this knowledge from? Where did they learn all these, mathematics, right? So that kind of started to clue in when I started to think about, the Nephilim and everything. Because I was growing up where, Noah's flood was always about
spiritual
sinners.
wickedness, the Sethite view.
People, right? Like, oh yeah, they God genocided humans because they were sinners. But then you start to actually read the scriptures, and it's like, oh wait, no, he did it because you had giants eating humans, like, and the wickedness from the offspring of these watchers and whatnot.
And the forbidden
creating the
knowledge
Nephilim.
they were given.
Yeah. Right. And you hear about, like, there's stories all throughout, ancient history and basically every culture that talk about it, and how they gained wisdom and knowledge from all these, different, gods, quote unquote, low G gods or lowercase g gods. And yeah, so it's like, you wonder where they get the knowledge from. And it's like, well, it's not that far of a stretch for me to believe that some fallen angel or some Nephilim, being that had the knowledge gave it to them. I mean, it's right in our scriptures that's what they were doing.
Yeah.
They were mating with them, giving, knowledge about weaponry and building and this, astrology and astronomy and mathematics. And, so it's like, these guys have been around, like they even,
and we see the archaeological evidence. It's like,
yeah,
look at the pyramids, look at Machu Picchu, and
yes.
Teotihuacan, and all these different places. And it's like, we can't replicate that today with our technology.
Yeah.
So they obviously had some knowledge that even we don't have today.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at when they were, I can't remember which scripture it was where they were talking about, but they were the Ark of the Covenant, and they were marching around with it for 3 days or whatever it was, creating the vibration in the walls of Jericho. I think it was the walls of Jericho came down, right? That's like a vibrational energy, and then you start to see, here's my tinfoil hat coming on. Yeah, you start to see our music, right? Has what they used to record music in, the frequency is different nowadays, and the different vibrational energy that comes from it. Then you look at like nowadays we have direct energy weapons setting Hawaii on fire, and setting Canada on fire. Like Canada had the worst year of forest fires. It's like, well, no, if you actually look at the historical data, it's a pretty normal year for us. It's just now the mainstream is trying to push their climate change agenda. And, I always say, thank God for climate change, because if not, we'd still be in the ice age.
Yeah.
But yeah, like there's definitely lost knowledge and lost technology out there that's just been suppressed. And we have.
And that's what these secret societies even pride themselves and openly say, that the ancient knowledge that was given has been preserved through esoteric symbols and teachings and allegory. And it's their job to pass these on to the next generation, but only to the ones that are deemed worthy. It's Hiram Abiff all over again. He had all the knowledge, and the three men, the students, wanted it now. They didn't want to wait for it, and when he wouldn't give it, they killed him.
Yep, 100%. And it's funny too, because like you think about like other apprenticeships, like I don't know if you ever did an apprenticeship, but they don't take, a year to go through an apprenticeship.
Yeah.
Like it takes time, but nowadays they just kind of rush through it. So it's like, and that's where the boys club aspect comes into it. Cause it's like, almost anybody, any male can get into masonry now.
Oh yeah.
Like biker clubs are more exclusive than Freemasonry.
Which I told a buddy of mine, we were talking about Freemasons and stuff, because we were talking on Facebook, and we were talking about Freemasonry and stuff. And then here comes a guy that's a 3rd-degree Mason, and he was like, no, they're a Christian organization. They do this and do that. I was a member for a long time. I've been there. You haven't. And no, you're wrong. There probably are some bad people. There probably are some people that worship Satan that go to the lodges, but it's not like that. And then, I replied back and I said, I agree. I said, I don't think, your average 3rd-degree Mason that's in your neighborhood is worshiping the devil, or trying to take over the world. I see it as just a men's lounge, leisure club, boys club, like you talked about. But I referenced it kind of like I said, remember when you're probably about my age, the original, or not the original, the second Ninja Turtles.
Okay.
When they were in New York, they formed the Foot Clan, and then they got all the troubled teens.
Yep.
And made them a place where they could go and hang out, play video games, and drink and party.
Yep.
There was people that went there every day for years and never got told nothing else, never knew nothing else existed. But the ones that showed promise were approached and pulled into the real Foot Clan and were trained to be ninjas.
Yep.
I said, that's how I see these Masonic lodges. They are social recruiting clubs. You get in, you get evaluated. If they think you've got potential, then you get pulled to the cigar lounge after party.
Yeah, I could have, because of the connections that I had. One of my buddy's father-in-law is actually a politician, and so when I was at his stag and doe, actually, I was running one of the games. I was the best man at the wedding. I was running one of the games, and I just happened to look over and see this prominent politician. And I'm like, oh, like he has a Masonic ring on. I've never met the guy. I knew who he was because of just, knowing politics and whatnot. And I'm like thinking to myself, like, this guy, he probably knows some stuff. He was a pretty head up politician in our province, and he was a Mason. So I went and talked to him for a little bit, and we just kind of, went through our little rigmarole of like, hey, like I go to this lodge and stuff like that. And we shot the breeze for a little bit. And I just got the vibe. We kept it very, like, very casual. Yeah, like we're in a public place. I'm not going to try to go into any of this stuff. But I did gain the impression that, outside of all of that, if I had, wanted to sit down with him, I probably could have, and probably could have gotten some pretty deep knowledge from him. And then you saw so in my lodge, we had a few different 32nd and 33rd degree guys that if, like you could look at one guy and be like, oh yeah, he's having a night out from his wife. But then you look at the other guy and you're like, oh, like there's something about his energy, and there's just something about the way that the person carried themselves. Like, I don't want to say very, stuck up, but like just holier than thou kind of attitude. Like, and you just get that vibe from this guy. Like he knows some stuff. And then you hear some things from other people, that started to kind of go through. Like I had one guy in my lodge that was starting to go through the York Rite, and his thing is he wanted to be a Knights Templar. So he was going through to do that, and he tried to get me to go in, but with my Scottish heritage, I tried to get into the Scottish Rite, but I ended up getting out before I got in to it, which thankfully, because although I'm like, maybe should have given it another 5 years and gone through the Scottish Rite just so I could learn all the nefarious crap that they do. But yeah, you hear the rumors, right? You do hear the rumors, and like I said, like in order to have influence, you infiltrate everything, right? So yeah, it's very interesting when you kind of, so like I get where that guy's coming from in the sense, like, and that's what I try to tell people too. Like the average person, it's just a boys club.
Yeah,
that's all it is.
I mean, I agree.
It's no different than going to the Legion, and having a beer with, your military buddies. Like it's similar to that, but just like everything, it's just like our governments, right? Like you're going to have your
good eggs, bad eggs,
Yeah.
I like how, are you familiar with Bill Cooper?
No.
William Cooper. He was brilliant man, done a show called The Hour of the Time, and he talked about this, and he actually interviewed a 33rd degree Mason. Like, I think it was the first time one ever went on an interview. Of course, they disguised his name and everything else, but he talked about a lot of really interesting stuff. but he was saying that basically that Freemasonry is like a religion. He said, and all religions have two sects. He said you have what the masses know, and what the elect know, and those are the ones that are in your high-ranking places, your millionaires and your politicians and stuff like that. Because those are the ones that are in the know. Because I mean, and this is just my opinion. I mean, I ain't got hard evidence, but it's like I've had enough life experience. I've struggled my whole life, and I know that I wouldn't even have a chance at running for office or senator because one, I don't have the money. Two, I don't have the connections. So it's like for the people that are in power, they had help.
Oh yeah.
So I mean, there's some stuff going on that not everybody is privy to.
Yeah, and then where I'm at too, is there's so many different organizations now that are kind of like your secret societies hiding in plain sight, like the WEF, right? Like the World Economic Forum.
Bilderberg.
Canada, yeah, right. Like Canada has like our prime minister and our deputy prime minister is one of the highest positions in the WEF. Her grandfather, I think it was great grandfather or grandfather, one of them was a Nazi. And then Canada just honored an actual Nazi in our parliament like 2 weeks ago.
Yeah,
gave him a standing ovation, and everybody's like, what the hell is going on? So it's like, and I can't say that Justin Trudeau is a Mason because I don't know if he is or not. He's definitely psychotic. He needs to go. But yeah, you look at these different groups now because like everybody, it used to be all Illuminati and it used to be Freemasons that everybody was thinking about taking over the world. But now it's like I look at these other groups and I'm like, these ones are almost doing more damage than anybody. Like the WEF, like I don't know, they might have ties to Masons. I have no idea personally, but I'm looking at it. I'm like, these guys are like more nefarious than the Masons are. Like they are literally trying to take over the world. With infiltrating every government in the world and at least in the West anyway. And so it's like, what group's going to pop out now? Like Freemasons have been around since the beginning of time. Even on my certificate that I got when I became a Master Mason, the date on it is 6014, right? AL. They call it Anno Luminis, which is the year of the light, which is kind of funny because in that sense, they almost think that the Earth is almost six.
That's what I was about to get at. Yeah, because I mean, if you go like biblical creationists, they take the genealogies, literal and go back, and they think it's anywhere from 6,000 to 10,000 years old. That's interesting.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm almost on the fence that they're correct, to be honest. And it's funny, like I won't say I'm a flat Earth believer, but I've heard some pretty compelling arguments towards it, especially biblically anyway. And people will call you a kook or crackhead or something like that for believing something like that, but that's fine.
Yeah.
I've seen enough in my lifetime. I'm 36. I've seen enough in my lifetime to know that 90% of what we're taught is malarkey. Our history has been completely rewritten. You see the things about the mud flood here in North America, things about all the giant serpent mounds, and the Smithsonian taking away giant skeleton bones, and like everything we know or everything we're taught is a lie. Even so, perfect example. We were looking at our son in grade 2, and so the teachers gave out this what the kids are going to be learning this year kind of thing. And so my girl was reading it to me this morning, and she's like, oh, this year they're going to be learning about when people first came to the North Americas, the European settlers first came over here. And I'm like, so they're still teaching the false history because we know that the Vikings were here first. Like that's already been proven.
Or at the very least before Columbus.
Well,
the very least
literally
before.
In Canada, there is a Viking settlement in Newfoundland.
Yeah.
That they literally just proved like a year or two ago that predates Christopher Columbus by 1,000 years, 1,100 years almost.
Yeah. Well, see, they're even finding Egyptian artifacts in the Grand Canyon. L.A. Marzulli. I just had him on the show the other day, and I was talking to him. he done like a seven or eight disc set on the trail of the Nephilim, and they went down there to Peru. And he said he's a
Yeah.
diffusionist. He believes we've been sailing the world for, you know, since the dawn of time,
Yeah.
and done DNA. He's the only person to do DNA testing on those skulls, and it came back. And he said that it was his theory that they were tied to the Nephilim and the Rephaim from the Levant. And sure
Mm-hmm.
enough, the results come back. It was had
It's like 30% or something was inhuman or something like that.
yeah, but it was like the human parts were only divided up into two. It was there was a small European strand, but the
Okay.
majority of it was from the Levant. And even when you look at the Europeans' point of it, I mean that's just crossed a large lake, the Mediterranean. You go from the Middle East straight across that, big pond, and there's Europe. So I mean that's not far fetched.
Yeah. Um,
That's why you got
like
pyramids
I've
everywhere, serpents
yeah,
everywhere, because
right. Like I've always believed in. I mean, even biblically, right? Like I'm not too savvy on the scriptures. It's one of the things I'm working on nowadays. But you hear about giants in both the Old Testament and the New Testament. So why it's like, how can you believe the Bible but believe that giants are false? Like that never like it, and that's one of the things that makes no sense to me is with some Christians, and they're just like, oh yeah, it's just a story.
yeah.
And it's like, well, how do you believe this part of the Bible but not that part of the Bible? Like I'm not saying take it for word for word in its entirety, although you probably should. But it's like, yeah, like how do you not believe it? Like it's everywhere, right in. I think it was Rick and I were talking about. Was it the Wendy's girl?
Oh yeah,
Right? Like, and I mean, now they say that it was the Wendy's daughter that they modeled the picture after, but like you hear about the descriptions of the giants, and red hair, freckled, right? It's the same thing with like clowns, right? Like the red lips and the red nose is symbolic to the blood of the victims that they were eating.
mm-hmm.
With clowns with the red hair and the big shoes. Why do clowns have big shoes? Well, these giants had massive feet, so it's
Yeah.
almost like they're dressing up like a giant in a sense, right?
Yeah, which I've heard that, and also just like the Indian stories. When you look back at
Yeah.
the Indian stories, I mean, they all have common stories about red-haired, six-fingered
Yep.
giants. Then you read in the Bible, David fought Goliath. Goliath was described as having 6 fingers,
Yep.
and that he was, they say, oh well, you don't, the measurements are this, or we don't know if it was the Egyptian cubit or the royal cubit, and if it was this cubit, he was only 6 foot something, but if he was this cubit, yeah, he was really big, but we think it's the smaller one, of course. But when you look at the context of the whole story, in Second Samuel, I believe it is, or Kings, one of the two, but when they picked Saul, it says specifically that they picked Saul because he was head and shoulders taller than the Jewish people, and that they
Mm-hmm.
wanted a king like the other nations. And the other nations, when you go through the genealogies and everything else in the histories, they were majority of them were giant clans. When they come out of Egypt and went into Exodus, all the clans that God told them to completely wipe out every man, woman, child. People's like, oh man, he told them to kill children and not to even take the animals. It's
Yep.
because they were giant blood. And so they picked Saul to have a king like the other nations, a warrior giant. And they said, well, the average Jew was 5'5". So if he was head and shoulders, Saul himself, head and shoulders taller than the average Jew, he was probably 6'8", 7 foot. And Goliath was so big that he was terrified and refused to go out and fight him. So if I'm a 7 foot tall guy and I'm a warrior king known for
Yeah.
my bloodshed, and there's some dude out in my front yard calling me out the door and I ain't coming out, he gonna be at least 10 foot, brother.
Oh yeah. 100%.
Yeah,
100%.
context is
Like,
king.
yeah, right. And it's like, because you're not going to want to embarrass yourself like that. You would have no honor left,
Yeah,
right? And that was one of the big things back then is being honorable.
yeah,
And if you're a king, nobody's going to follow you if you're too afraid. So yeah, like he had to have been massive in order for Saul to not want to engage with him.
yeah.
right?
Especially with
Like
the whole country
it's
watching.
right. Like you got everybody watching you, and it's like I know I'm afraid of this guy. Like he had to have been massive, you know. And then you see like other research too, that like with giant footsteps and stuff, you know, all or like fossilized footsteps that you know are basically, I guess, would wear like a you know would make Shaq look like a kid. You know, like his feet are just massive. And it's the same thing with like the whole Bigfoot story too, right? Like where Bigfoot and like the size of their feet, right? Everybody gets the descriptions wrong because they're like, oh yeah, like 20. When you think of like a shoe size, like oh he's on 20 size 24. It's like yeah, but that doesn't mean his feet are 24 inches. It means they're like 12 inches. You know, a size 24 is not 24 inches, right? So it's like when you start seeing these footprints that are 24 inches in length, it's like obviously, there was something on this earth at one point in time that was human like, that was that big. You know, obviously, with the design of, like you said, the pyramids all over the world, they were everywhere with these giant burial mounds that are everywhere, right? But they try to hide it. They try to, and that's why I think, like, to me personally, a lot of our history is just, made
Yeah,
up.
obfuscated. Yeah.
Yeah. We're never going to know. Like, we're not going to know the
When
truth,
you're next to
obviously, until.
Niagara, Abraham Lincoln, he
Yep.
said right there in that speech, he said that lost race of extinct giants whose eyes stared on Niagara as our eyes do now, whose bones fill the mounds of America. But,
Yeah.
I guess honest
Yeah.
Abe lied that one time. I don't know.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. No, have you ever been to Niagara Falls? Have you ever seen
No,
it?
I've just seen
It's,
pictures and
it's,
video, but
it's neat, man. Like it's really cool. It's one of those things like, yeah, like you're standing there and you're just staring at this and you're wondering like what, like, 200-300 years ago, what were the people that are standing in the exact spot that I'm standing now thinking when they're looking at that, um, it's a pretty neat place. If you ever get the chance, you should check it out. It's, definitely worth the trip. So, but yeah, Niagara Falls is actually really like a big paranormal. Like a lot of blood has been spilled because I don't know how much you've read into like spilt blood and like land curses because of spilt blood.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I was trying to think of that
Um,
author, Laura Sanger.
Yeah, yeah. So Niagara being like, are you familiar with the War of 1812 at all?
No, not really.
So it's so funny. They don't teach that in the U.S. Of course they don't. Um, so the War of 1812 was the only time where Canada and the U.S. were at war with each other. Now,
I'm
technically,
guessing the
Canada
United
was,
States lost since we're not talking about it.
yeah, you guys, so it's still technically the British Empire at the time here in Canada. But it was after your guys, so obviously after your American Revolution. But yeah, the War of 1812, you guys invaded Canada. You wanted our land and all that kind of stuff. And you didn't like the British, obviously, right? So you guys invaded us. We literally sent you packing all the way back to Washington. We burned your White House to the ground, which a lot of people don't realize that the White House actually got
I
literally
think I
put up in
remember
flames.
this now. It's ringing some
Yeah,
bells. It's just been a long time since I've heard about it.
Yeah, so there's actually a painting of the Canadian soldiers burning the White House down, and I'm pretty sure it's hanging in the White House, if I remember correctly. So, but yeah, so during that war, in the area that I live in now, a lot of the battles took place in the Niagara region. Like there's old War of 1812 fort 20 minutes away from where I live. So this whole area is just littered with spilt blood, right? And like land curses, and so like I used to do I used to do a lot of local forest stealth camping, as I would call it, because it's illegal to camp in any random forest here in Ontario. It has to be crown land, which the nearest crown land to me is 3 hours away, 3 hours north of where I live.
It's like a
So I
government
used to
park, basically.
yeah, like it's crown land owned by the government, and so there's very few regulations, and you can literally just hike in. You can pick a spot anywhere in the forest, and you can camp there for 21 days, and then you have to move 100 yards. You have to move your camp 100 yards from that place, and then your 21 days resets. You can hunt on certain crown land, not all crown land. You can fish, basically, but you have to buy a fishing license. You can get a catch and release, or you can get a sport one where you can actually catch fish. If you're Native Canadian, Indigenous, or whatever the phrase is like to use these days, basically have like unlimited fishing. You also don't pay taxes. So, but yeah, so this area was very big for those battles. And so I would go camping in there, and not realizing that one of the areas that I camped in was pretty haunted. And like I grew up in the area, and so as a kid I used to ride there's a lot of bike trails, like ramps and stuff through the forest that people have made over the years. So I used to ride my bikes and stuff. I used to hang out with my friends, play chase and hide and go seek in the forest as a kid. Never really think anything of it because, you know, the forest is always just kind of weird sounds anyway. But then as I got older and I started camping in there, that's when some weird stuff started to happen, you know, and I was really into the New Age stuff. I just got into Freemasonry, so I'd already gone through a couple oaths. And so, yeah, like one night I sleep in a hammock. I hammock camp most of the time. When I'm by myself, I hammock camp. It's me and my girl, we have a tent. Although I spent a lot of money on a dual hammock setup that we don't like to use because she thinks the camping in a hammock, you're too open. So she's afraid of, you know, bears or anything.
They think that sheet of nylon in the tent's gonna stop the bear.
Yeah. I'm like, you're not any more protected in the tent than you are in a hammock, but you know, that's beside the point. So I was hammock camp, and I keep my hammock about 4 feet off the ground because where I am, the biggest animal you're going to see is a deer, you know, and then there's coyotes. There have been some bobcats around or not bobcats, cougars around, and then there's also been some coy wolves, so like a coyote wolf mix that have come down from up north that I actually have a video of somewhere. But so one night, it's probably about, I guess morning, it's like 5 o'clock in the morning, and I hear like rustling around. So I'm thinking it's a coyote, and I feel it like run under my hammock. And this thing's so big, when it runs under my hammock, its back is brushing against mine, right? And I'm 4 feet off the ground almost. So this thing was massive. And as it's running under, I hear like a giggle. Like it sounded like a schoolgirl.
Like a hyena.
Not even. It sounded like a child just playing as it's running under, because it's almost like that giggle, like ha ha ha, I scared you, as it's running underneath my hammock, brushing against my back. And I'm like, what the hell? So I kind of roll over and I look out my hammock, and there's this coyote just standing there staring at me, kind of winks, and then I'm like doing one of those like rubbing my eyes, like am I dreaming kind of thing, and then it's just gone.
How far away was it? Was it like right in your face?
Oh yeah, like it was probably, so when it ran under, it brushed its back against mine. I look out and it's probably 4 feet away from the hammock, you know. And I'm not afraid of coyotes, but this thing scared the shit out of me because it was like, one, it was massive. Two, it was giggling, and then it winks at me, and you know, and then it just poof, was gone, disappeared. No, I heard it coming into my campsite, but I didn't hear it leaving my campsite. It just vanished. And then, you know, that kind of tripped me out. And then I don't know if it was the next week or 2 weeks later. So it was around the same time I go back into that forest. But
you go back.
Yeah, I go back into this forest to go camping again because, you know, I'm bright like that. And this was the last time I ever went back into there at night, because I would go in, because being that it's illegal to camp in these forests, I would always go in around sundown when people aren't hiking on this trail. And because the Bruce Trail, which is the 886 kilometer trail, runs right through this forest. And so I would just kind of hike in and hike off into the forest off trail and set up. I had a little spot that now is actually the backyard of a house. They just built a whole new subdivision in there. They tore most of the forest down. So I got to go in, and the whole energy, it was just like we were saying that night when I came home the night from work, the energy was just very heavy, and it felt dark. Like, you know, when you walk past like an old abandoned house and you just feel like that dark energy, like radiating off that property. Yeah. It was the same idea.
Makes you feel small. It's like something's towering over you and looking down and pressing on you.
Yeah, like you just like the whole energy, just like it felt like it's like just crushing you. And I mean, I by this point had probably camped close to 200 nights over the last couple of years prior, like over the last, like in that time frame, like 2 year time frame, I probably camped almost 200 nights in this forest specifically. And I've never been so afraid to go into that forest as I did that night. And so I'm walking in and you just get this energy and I'm just like, and then off in the distance, I see something walking and I'm like, okay, like it's, nobody should be really in here. But I thought maybe it was just somebody out for a late night stroll. And then all of a sudden I'm looking a bit closer and I'm like, well, wait a second. I'm like, it didn't look right to me. And then it looked like, almost like somebody was wearing the PJs that you wear during your initiations in Freemasonry. So like that old school clothing, like, War of 1812 type clothing, walking through, but he's not really walking. He's more just kind of hovering through. And then as he kind of comes around, like he goes past this tree, and as he comes around this tree, you can see he's got a bayonet stuck in his chest. And, just this, like, I always say, like, I don't know if this was in my head that I heard it or if it was actually audible, but to me it sounded audible. And it was like the most gut wrenching, like, leave, get out that I've ever heard. And I was just like, turned around. I was like, I hiked the heck out. I got out of Dodge real quick. That hike should have taken me 10 minutes. And I think it took me 3 because I was gone. I was running down this trail. Like and I've been back to that forest once, but it was in the afternoon. And I've never been back since. And, I, at that time too, I was really into, like working with this lady who was I guess a medium, you could call her. Psychic, whatever you want to call her. She was kind of like a spiritual guidance person for me, though. So I kind of showed her on a map, like, hey, like this is like the area that it was in, and she was going on about, oh yeah, there's a portal there. She's like, I'd stay away, or at least be careful. And ever since then, I've always kind of felt like it has some weird attachment to me, or at least I started to notice things. I started to notice that every little thing in life became difficult, to the point of like opening a jar became difficult. And I became more and more frustrated, which becomes a very vicious cycle. And then, you start every decision you make is the wrong decision. You have no discernment whatsoever. You can't sleep. You start to go crazy. You start thinking you're crazy. And it wants to push you to that edge, like I was, talking about earlier.
Yeah, this is that same time frame, right?
Same time frame. And so it was really weird. I did the antidepressants. Turned out it was antipsychotics they put me on, which made things even worse. I blacked out driving one time and just ended up in the driveway of a gas station at 6 o'clock in the morning driving to work. It really affected my life going into this area and camping into this forest. And then not only that, but there was also in 1998, the high school in the area, they had a bush party, and a gang showed up and started a fight and literally, cut a guy's arm off with a machete.
Good Lord.
In this forest. Yeah. It's a great place to camp, where all this blood's been
Sounds like
spilled.
it.
And then and I was living in this town, an old town, not far from the city that I grew up in. So when I was engaged at one point in my earlier 20s, and we had split, and I couldn't afford the apartment that we were living in anymore on my own, so I had to kind of just move and take the first thing that I could afford. So I ended up finding this little 62-year-old woman who was renting out her basement. It wasn't even an apartment. It was literally, you had to walk through the front door of the house to get down to the basement, had a hot plate and a microwave and a place for a bed. But the oldest place in the house was where the bedroom was. And there's a little cellar off to it. And it just always creeped me out being in this place. I was working 2 jobs at this point. So I was barely ever home. But whenever I was, it was just, there was no windows. So it was it was a 120-year-old house. And I'm living in the oldest part of the house. And I remember one night, I'm sitting there, I don't know, I was doing something on my computer, downloading music probably. And all of a sudden, like, I just felt this, again, same thing, this real heavy presence, and I could not move. I was paralyzed. Fully awake, wasn't sleeping, but paralyzed. And I kind of look up, and in the corner, just saw a shadow figure, I guess you could call it. and it just kind of, it's standing there just staring at me for a few seconds. And then it like, I'm trying to move, I'm trying to scream, can't. Like nothing, like I'm like, trying to scream, but nothing's coming out kind of thing. And which is one of the most frustrating feelings ever, by the way.
Yeah. I've never had it happen waking, but plenty of dreams. You try to scream or something and you can't.
Right. So imagine being fully conscious and that's happening to you, and then it just like kind of like came at me and like belted out this ear piercing screech and then gone, just poof, gone. And I never experienced that since, thankfully. But I always see shadow people now. Like it's something that's kind of haunted me for years. And I don't know if it's the generational curses and, the things that I always did when I was younger, like the seances in cemeteries and stuff, with friends and doing the Ouija board. And like, I remember I was a young teen, I had some anger issues and especially because of the drugs that I was doing at the time. And my sister was using the Ouija board one night in her room. She made like a makeshift one out of paper and whatever. And I'm doing the dishes, and I go to go put the dishes away, and I open one of the cupboards, and there's a plate floating. And I kind of, did a double take. I'm like, what the heck? And then all of a sudden it just flies and smashes. And I'm like, what? And all of a sudden another plate comes flying out of the cupboard, smashes. Bowl comes flying out, smashes. And I like, shut the cupboard. And I'm like looking around. I'm like, there's nobody here. Like everybody's upstairs. I'm down in the kitchen. I'm like, how the hell am I going to explain this?
I'm going to be in so much trouble.
Right? I ended up taking the punishment because I'm like, the punishment would be better than my parents sending me to an insane asylum because I told them that the plates just flew out of the cupboard on their own.
Have you told them since you've been an adult?
No. I'm still waiting for them to figure out Spotify so they can listen to the podcast that I've been on. My in-laws, though, they listen to it, and it's funny because after they listened to it, they kind of opened up about some of their experiences. So
it's a domino effect. Most people have these experiences, but they're ashamed to be looked at like they're crazy until they hear someone else talk about it, and then they feel safe and that they're not crazy. True story. We went to what was the name of that conference? I can't remember now, but we went to a conference
recently.
It was last October. We went to it was in right at the border of Kentucky and I think Indiana. It was like in Lexington or something like that. I can't remember. Louisville.
Okay.
But we met Tom Dunn, Vicky Joy, and Derek, Sharon Gilbert. Just a bunch of good people was there, and we were sitting. They had a dinner function afterwards. You could pay extra for dinner and get to hang out with the speakers. And we were sitting at the table, and this old woman, sweet little old woman, sitting beside of us. Looked like your grandma that knits sweaters and goes to church every Sunday. And we were just kind of talking about the speakers, and Vicky Joy hadn't came on yet. And my buddy Steve, he said, yeah, I'm really looking forward to hearing from Vicky Joy. And then that woman just kind of looked at him like she didn't understand who he was talking about. And he said, Vicky Joy, the one that wrote the book on sleep paralysis, how, the demonic attacks, people in their sleep and all this kind of stuff. And she was like, I didn't know about that. Now, what is that? And he was describing what sleep paralysis was. And then I even said, my wife, she has episodes, at least 3 or 4 times a year. I said, where they jump over the bed back and forth, pull her hair. I mean, just all kinds of crazy stuff. Pull the covers off. She said, she can sit there and watch the bed even bowl out like someone sits down. And I'm such a hard sleeper. I sleep through all this stuff. But I remember when I was working night shift, it was the weekend, and I was still like on my night shift schedule. She was back in the bedroom asleep, and I was in the living room watching TV or playing a game or something. And I heard her like tussling, moaning. And I'm like, oh, she's having a night terror or whatever. So I went to go back there to check on her. And she had her lamp on beside the bed. She likes to read and go to sleep. And I'm not kidding. As soon as I walked in the room, the light blows. and she sits straight up and she's like gasping for air. And I'm like, "Honey, you all right?" She's like, "No." She said, "Is it gone?" She's looking around. She said that basically this shadow come across her and laid across her, and she couldn't get up, and that it was like strangling her. And that when she said, and she could see it all, and she said, "I seen you walk in the room." She said, and it took off, and it's like it let me go. And this woman was like, "Oh my God, I've been having these episodes for years." And I mean, she about breaks down and cries on me. And she was like, "I've never told a soul." She said, "I was afraid people think I'm crazy." And then she's like, "Who's this woman?" And she's like, "When's she speaking?" So, I mean, that's just another prime example. People are having experiences. They're just afraid to be shunned and made fun of and belittled by talking about them.
Yeah, and I'm seeing more, and that's why like podcasts like yours are so important. Just having like average Joe knuckle draggers like me, share their stories, because I'm finding that more and more people have these experiences or have had these experiences. But yeah, like you said, they're just too afraid to come out and talk about it. And fun, they can't do it at church. And I said this on the Solar Pill thing. I said that the Bible is one of the most paranormal books ever written. And if the church really wanted to captivate people more, they need to start speaking more on that stuff. And I'm not like, because when I went to church, it was all like the same 10 gospels every, couple weeks. They would just regurgitate the same, passages over and over again. And it's just like, okay, like we need something more exciting than this. And so like, I guess you could do that maybe in a Bible study group versus going to church and stuff. But yeah, the Catholic Church doesn't really talk about the paranormal side of things. And I think that if they really started to do that, I think they'd captivate their audience more, and more people would have a better understanding of the demonic and dark forces that take place in this world, and the principalities, that they have over, dominion over certain parts of the earth. And like, even so, like my in-laws, when they first heard me on the first podcast talking about my stories and talking about, so they lived at the time of the paralysis one with the shadow figure in that lady's basement. They actually lived like 2 blocks away from where I was living at that time, which we didn't know each other then. But they started telling me about a shadow figure that my father-in-law kept seeing. And, my mother-in-law was always kind of like, yeah, okay, whatever, right? Like, drinking too much or something like that.
Bad pizza
and then
sauce.
One night, like you're just hallucinating or whatever. And then one night she ended up seeing it, red glowing eyes of a shadow figure just standing at their window, staring at them. And so, then she kind of was like, became a believer in that this stuff actually happens, and then it was not something they never talked about. And then they heard me talking about it, and now they've kind of, they feel more comfortable talking about it. And I'm sure that the same thing, more and more people, as they listen to these podcasts, they're gonna come out, and I think that's what we need. I think we need more people to start waking up and start realizing that their experiences just aren't something, in their mind, that it actually is happening, that these dark forces, and I've always said that I think the dark forces are starting to ramp up, because I think they know that their end is coming.
Yeah. The time runs short.
Yeah. We already know what happens in the end. We win. Christ wins. And so I think that they realize that their time is getting shorter and shorter, and they're trying to take over as many people as they possibly can before it happens.
Yeah.
Again, like I'll reiterate, that's why podcasts like yours are so important, man, to help people wake up, because we need change. I don't know what the solution is. I don't know how to fix the problems. Yeah, 100%, 100%. Like I pray every day now. It's something that, this year's I've really made the conscious effort to do. That's why I went and got the Bible, because it was like the one that I have, the Masonic one, I just don't feel right using outside of using it as a prop right now. I feel that,
and I'm proud of you, brother. And
sense.
if you ever got any questions, just want to talk, whatever, man, you hit me up.
Yeah, 100%. You got my Instagram, so I'm always available. I'm up late, so it's usually when I'm responding is 2:00 in the morning. So, but yeah, we definitely needed to bring Jesus back into the equation in this world, I think.
Mm.
And like I said, we're starting to see a little bit more and more, but we've got a long way to go and a lot of work to do, I think. So
Yeah.
I'm glad that you know, podcasts like yours exist for people like me.
No,
So
I appreciate people like you listens to hillbilly like me south of the border.
yeah, I love the accent. It's so great to listen to.
Well, brother,
Oh,
but
I
thank you
love
for
it.
coming
I
on,
love it.
man. I really appreciate
Oh,
it.
thank you for having me,
And
man.
if you don't mind, you care if I pray
Yep,
with you before we leave? Because I know you kept talking about all the
100%.
stuff you're going through, and I don't know. I mean, if you had anybody pray with you, dude, I had a feeling to do that if you'd allow me.
100%. I'd appreciate that.
Heavenly Father, thank you for today, and thank you for the many blessings that you've given us. Thank you for Brother Brady, giving him the courage and emboldening him to come on and talk to everybody today. Uh, as you're well aware, Father, he's been under spiritual attack, him and his family. And I just want to pray that the Holy Spirit wraps around him and his home and his loved ones and protect them, strengthen and comfort them. And Father, we rebuke any evil spirits and any generational curses that is over him and his family. We cancel those contracts in the name of Jesus and with the blood of Jesus on the cross. Brother Brady is a new man in Christ, and that contract, you said it yourself on the cross, it is done. Tetelestai, paid in full. So, and just as all contracts, Father, and for those listening, any contract agreed upon under false pretenses is null and void to begin with. So we proclaim that in your name, and we proclaim that in your blood, that these evil spirits have no hold over this brother or his family or his house, and we rebuke them in the name of Jesus. Amen.
Amen. Thanks, brother.
Hey,
Appreciate it.
man, I appreciate you. Appreciate your time.